I'm Ryan Bracken. I'm with DroneSense. I'm not wearing a DroneSense shirt, but I promise you I do work for DroneSense. And I'm the VP of Customer Success here. I also am Chief Information Security Officer. And I happen to be a lover of data. So please don't hold that against me. So, our platform, if you're not familiar with it, we have really three primary types of people or functions that we support. So pilots out in the field, flight control applications, we try to make that as intuitive as possible. We have our operations support capabilities, live streaming, seeing where drones are while they're flying, and then the administrative side, making the most of your system, of your platform. So that's what we're going to be spending a lot of our time discussing today. So DroneSense helps you collect all sorts of information about your flights. So how do you make the absolute most of that data? One of the things I'll just say is not as a disclaimer, but we're coming out with all sorts of cool reporting capabilities right within the platform. So some of the stuff that we're talking about today may not be necessary to all of you in a few months as we build out these new capabilities. However, I believe that a basic understanding of how to deal with some of this more raw data will benefit you. And when you get a question, hey, how many hours have you done X? Or how many hours did you spend flying this mission? Or who's your highest time pilot? You can use the techniques I'm about to show you to answer those unequivocally. So I think it'll be valuable for most folks. So first of all, filter the data so that you're only seeing what you care about. Next, how do you export that in a way that you can manipulate, graph, understand the data? And then finally, for the people that need to see maybe a more geographical representation of this information, how do you export those flight paths? Filters are available on virtually every tab you'll find within our web application. So you can use them to search for a particular flight, limit the results to say a particular date range, find flights in a certain area. We're going to show you a couple different ways to accomplish that. You can display archived or training flights, things with different types of flags. I mean, you can even search for particular things in the notes. So if you want to flag flights with a particular, say additional information, you can put that in the notes and then search the notes field for specific words or strings. CSV exports. So I've said CSV already 3 or 4 times. First of all, what the heck is a CSV? The CSV stands for comma separated values. All it is a string of values separated by commas, and those values usually translate into something like a grid. A spreadsheet is almost always the way you'll interact with a CSV file. So that means that these CSV files you can open them in Excel, Google Sheets. If you're a Mac user, you can use Numbers. There's any number of free and open source programs you can use to view this data. The great thing is once you pull it into something, we're going to use Excel today, you can make graphs, you can manipulate the data, hide and adjust columns. Of course, we don't want you to manipulate data in the bad way, only in the good way. Okay, so where do you click to get that? You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, and this is grayed out. It's kind of a muted thing for a reason. Not everybody needs to be clicking on CSV exports all day, every day. So right next to there, to the Add New Flight, this is under the Flights tabs. Between that and your selector for how you want to view these flights is this little, it looks like a little upload export button. And that will export that, of course. Got to be careful with your mouse. Okay, so that's how you're going to export, and we'll go over this in more detail in a minute. Okay, finally, flight path export. We allow you to export your flight paths in 3 different formats: GeoJSON, GPX, which is more of a Garmin format, and then KML, which I believe is actually a Google format. And so we're going to focus on KML. But to do that, you're going to see that little export flight path in the lower right-hand corner of your flight details page. Right down there in the lower right-hand corner, you'll click Export Flight Path, and you're going to come up with 3 options: GeoJSON, GPX, or that KML export. So you click on KML, it'll immediately begin downloading that KML file. Most of the time, they're very small and very quick to download. So the question is, what the heck is a KML file? And really, if you're familiar with XML, it's a very simple file structure. You have a header, it has some information about what it is and how it's formatted, and then it's just simply a string of 3 repeating pieces of information separated by commas here. So that's longitude, then latitude, and then your altitude over and over and over again throughout for the entire flight. So you'll see down here just a list of those locations and altitudes. Those altitudes are in meters, and that gives you all the information about where the aircraft was during a flight. Why would I show you this thing? I mean, most people just fell out of their chairs in horror, showing you a piece of what looks like code. Why would I show you that? Because you can open this file and get to very specific, very precise locations and altitudes from that. So if you're in a situation where you need to know precisely where did I take off, I just want to cut and paste the location, you can do that right there from those coordinates. Okay, where will you usually use KML files? Most of the time, you're going to use them in Google Earth. There's a bunch of different programs that can, you've got Garmin programs and others that you can use. Today, we'll be discussing Google Earth. Very easy way to open up KML files. On most systems, when you click on a KML file, it will automatically load in Google Earth if you have installed. All right, let's head over to our demo. Here we are in our Flights and Missions tab. So we've logged into DroneSense, and we now have our Flights and Missions tab open. So first of all, we talked about filters. So if we're here on our Flights and Missions tab, and we'll expand that so we can see we're here, we have our tab open and we see a bunch of flights. Now, it may be that I don't care about these particular flights. So before I get to exporting CSVs or KMLs or doing any of this fancy stuff we're talking about, first of all, how do I find the flight that I actually care about? In this case, I'm thinking of a flight that I did on a Parrot Anafi, and I was up in a place near basically where I grew up in upstate New York. And the question is, how do I get to that particular flight? It was a cool flight. I remember it, but where is it? So the first thing I'm going to do is go up here in the upper left, and I'm going to click on this filter button. So now you can see you can filter by flight name, that notes column that I talked about, whether it's training or archived or offline. You can filter your flights based on those pieces of information. Some details, start dates, the drone models. Oh, remember I was flying in an Anafi. I don't remember exactly which Anafi, so I'm just going to click on all 3 of these, and that will narrow it down at least to get rid of all the DJI and Autel aircraft that I've flown. Okay, so we'll go down here, hit apply. And so now I only have Anafi flights. But if you see here, these are all my name, but if we click through, it won't be just my name. There'll be other names in here. As we click through, you probably see some for Josh and others that have been flying Anafi drones. So we go up here, it's still not restricted enough. So what we might be able to do then is actually say, well, we can do it on location. So we could filter based on where the aircraft took off. But let's first do last name. So I'm going to type in my last name here and now hit apply. And now we've restricted it just to para aircraft that I have flown. So, and again, we can go back to the filters and do more filtering if we want, but I do want to just show, just for point of reference, of course, we're looking at thumbnails here. You can also look at these in lists, which can be very useful. But since I have a geographic understanding of what happened, most of my flights are down here in the Virginia area, but I'm thinking about some flights that happened up in upstate New York. So let's look at those first. So I'm going to zoom in and I say, I know I was flying in this area in New York State, and I can look down through here and I can see a list of flights. Now, if you see the flight you're looking for, great. You can click on that and be on. So instead, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back to the filters and say location. Use that particular location, hit apply. And now we have only the flights that have occurred from that address, basically, that I just typed in. So let's go back to our details. And now you have a nice list of these flights that you may or may not be interested in. Okay, so this is a 6 minute and 31 second flight that looks interesting, but it's not the one we were talking about. Okay, I think this is it. This is the one where I did a flight over the garden, and that should be a good flight to look at. Okay, so we've now narrowed it down to the flight that we care about. So we can export flight path and do all the stuff that we had talked about. All right, so let's zoom out again. We'll go back to flights, and we'll say, you know what? I just want to look at these particular flights. I want more information about those flights, but I don't want the details. I don't want to drill into each detail page. So what we're going to do now is head up here to this export, and if I just hover over it, you'll see it comes up as export CSV. So we'll click on that, and as soon as I click on that, you'll see it instantly downloads this CSV file. So now I'm not going to open it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to show it in Finder, and you'll see it just came up as filtered data set. So that's not terribly descriptive at the moment. So what I want to do is say this is Bracken Anafi, and I should spell my name correctly. And we'll say upstate. Okay, so now I've got, it's named more appropriately about how I filtered or how I got to those flights. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open it, and I'm going to open it with Excel. As I said, CSV files will open almost anywhere, and we're pulling this one open as an Excel file. All right, so let's zoom in. We'll make this 150% and expand it. Okay, so what we have in a CSV file, now this is going to change depending on, right now I'm looking at flights, so this has a lot of flight information, where the longitude, latitude, things like that. This is going to change depending on what screen you're on when you exported the flight details, or whatever details you're exporting as a CSV. So in a lot of cases, this is troubleshooting information. This is all really important data for us to have. But the first thing I'm going to do is try to limit the amount of noise. So what I'm looking to do is just understand how much total flight time I did up there, just some information about this flight activity. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some hiding here. So I'm just going to highlight the columns I don't care about, and I'm going to click hide. The start date and end date, I don't care so much about end date. We'll just stick with start date, so I'm going to hide that as well. And I'm also, I know it's me, this is only me, and I know the location, and I know the types of aircraft. So I'm going to hide all of that. And then takeoff and landing, all that stuff, again, I'm not terribly interested. Actually, I'm not interested in the rest of it up into the mission names. Okay, so now I've got that down to a fairly manageable list of information. So the name of the drone, the start date, we can expand these out so they're easier to see, and the mission names. So in this case, only 2 were associated missions. The rest were offline flights. So I had this one on a case and this one attached to both the case and a flood mission. So now if you want to do more math here, one thing I'll show you very quickly is you can, if you want the total here, you can just do sum, open parentheses, and just drag down here, close your parentheses, hit enter, and you'll see, oh man, I flew 2,325. Now, is that a useful information? Is that useful information? What is that? Oh, that's seconds. So what I want to show you what to do here is just insert another column. Actually, let's insert 2. And I'm going to do flight time, and that's minutes. We'll stretch these out. And flight time, hours. Depending on your situation, you may want other units, and that's fine. It's very easy to do in Excel. So what you do is just type a little equal sign. You're going to type, just click on the cell next to it. In this case, we want to divide that by 60 because we want minutes. So a little divide symbol by 60. And then you've got that. And what we can do is just a little corner, drag that down. And now we have that. And now to get from minutes to hours, we're going to divide by 60 again. So equals that flight time in minutes divided by 60. Hit enter. And then we'll do the same thing. Drag that all the way down. Now you may say, well, this doesn't look pretty. I don't think it looks pretty either. So let's go up here to, we can reduce the number of decimals. And we're recording this, so if anyone needs to refer back to this, that's fine. So I'm going to drop this down to do maybe, yeah, let's do 2 decimal points. Okay, so now we have flight time in minutes and hours. So the important thing here is up there, in my mind, I did all sorts of flying up there in upstate New York. Dozens of flights and tens of hours of flight time. And then, of course, we do the math. We see that I've actually only spent 38.75 minutes in flight, not even a whole hour there in upstate New York. So, just like fish, the memory of our flight activities grow with time, and we can see with some certainty, how much time I actually spend flying up there. Now, this, of course, is just me up there flying, doing demos or having fun. For your operations, you may have specific questions about particular things you did in a particular area, and this is how you answer that question. Okay, so we're going to close that. We don't need to save it. The next thing I want to show, so that was some flight information. The next thing I want to show you is something around hardware. We can go through that same process of looking at different aircraft, filtering them down. In this case, I'm not going to do any filtering at all. All I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over here to batteries, and that's going to show all the batteries that we have, and I'm going to click export. So now we have a full list of every battery that we've flown on. So I'm going to again show this in the Finder, and on Windows it'll be something very similar. We're going to rename that, and that's going to be full battery list. Typed it correct the first time. And again, I'm going to right click and I'm going to open it with Excel. Okay. And again, it's going to look, there's going to be a lot of data on here. So we are going to, first thing we're going to do, first order of business, of course, is to actually zoom in. So it's a little easier for us to view. And the first thing I'm going to do, again, is I'm going to hide a bunch of cells. So we'll click hide. I don't want to see the serial numbers. I don't need to see, actually, let's leave the manufacturer out for now. We don't need location or location name. Again, we'll hide that. The last flight, we do care about that. Charge remaining, full charge capacity, number of discharges. Okay, so all this information that's left is pretty darn interesting. So now, same thing, the flight time, that's going to show up in seconds again. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a couple of columns, and that's going to be flight time minutes, and this will be flight time in hours. Do the same thing, so that's going to be equal to this divided by 60. And we'll do hours is minutes divided by 60 again. And we'll drag those down to the bottom. Now there's a lot more results here. There's 60 some batteries in our fleet. I'm not going to clean this up this time because right now what we're going to do, we're concentrating on, I want to see how much we're using each battery and see if we need to redistribute batteries from one person to the next. So we have, we're going to go, let's see the name of the battery. So I'm going to click on this column and I'm going to hit Command or Control. And what I want to look at now is number of discharges. So we'll click on that column. Actually, we'll do number of flights instead. And I want to plot this. So now, we all know that graphs make things easier to understand. So we're going to go here and we're going to go to insert. We're going to click on a column chart. And there we go. We've now got a column chart that shows how many flights we have on each particular battery. And what you'll see is that, it's not too far off. I mean, we've got some batteries here that have flown more than others. But this is going to be a nice, easy way to now see, how much am I utilizing each of these batteries. We have a whole bunch of batteries that have only one flight, which is pretty typical for a fleet like ours that does a lot of demos, but not a whole lot of flights. So again, we could do the same plot, but add discharge cycles and other types of information that may be useful. Okay, so that's plotting and manipulating data in Excel. We could do the same thing. We don't have time, but we could do the same thing with pilot records and see who's flying more than the other. I was going to do that, but it was going to be embarrassing because Josh has flown about 5 times as much as I have on the platform. So we just don't have time to get into that today. Okay, so let's get rid of Excel. We don't need to save that. In most cases, you will do that. One thing I do want to point out is if you want to see how 1 month compares to the last, you can do date range filtering on the data. And so you could actually do this just for last month or a particular month or week. And that can really help, again, see trends over time. If you have any questions, help@dronesense.com. I'll be happy to walk you through different ways to manipulate and analyze your data. Okay, that was a lot of fun for me. Let's go back to flights and missions. You remember we had found this one particular flight that was really interesting. Actually, it was this other one. Yeah, this is the flight we found that was so interesting. And so we hit export flight. And now we're going to export that KML file and hit confirm. And again, just like the CSVs, as soon as you hit confirm, it's going to pop out. Now, this is going to give, it's kind of like a token. It's a tag. It's not a terribly human readable name for the flight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the flight name here. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to open this thing just like we did with the CSVs. And I'm going to rename that with the flight name. So now that's the flight path. If I double click this, it's going to open it up in Google Earth. And you'll see Google Earth is pretty awesome. It's just going to zoom in to the location of that flight. Once you're there, you can move your view around. And this really does help you understand what you're doing during a flight. So this is Google Earth, again, zooming in, zooming out, able to manipulate. You can even drop yourself down if it's available. Drop yourself down to Street View and see what would that flight path have looked like from the Street View. And so here you can see a general idea. We've got a little, there may be there's a little hang up here, but anyway, you can see generally the flight location from what it would look like from the Street View. So that's Google Earth. The other thing you can do, which I think is very interesting, is go back to missions and export entire missions. So if we just pick, say, like training flights, come up here and generate a KML for all of the training flights, this is going to do the same thing, but instead of for one flight, it's going to generate KML files for all of the flights within that training, in this case, training flights mission. So if I click on that, and of course, we'll want to zoom out significantly. Okay. So, so we zoom in and we can see this is not just one flight, but multiple flights on top of each other. We can turn each flight on or off, and that'll give you an idea of which flight is which. But that way you can actually say, man, I just want to see on an overlay all the flights that we did as a part of this particular mission, and give you a great understanding of what that operation looked like. Again, with all those tools you have in Google Earth. If you're using something else, You can export it as GPX or as GeoJSON files as well. So just different ways that you can kind of hopefully make your life a little easier. Okay, so that was a wild ride, 30 minutes of just pure joy for me talking about data, but a wild ride through some of the options that you have available in the platform with which to look at your data. So filtering, a very important part. Please, please just try that out and tell us how that works for you. If there are additional fields you'd like to see in the filtering, help@dronesense.com. Give us a shout. We'd love to add, to talk to you about different ways to make that easier. CSV exports, very powerful. Tons and tons of data in there. We recommend just playing with it. Use some of the techniques I showed you. There's lots more techniques, tons and tons of how-to videos to use spreadsheets to manipulate CSV files. So please give that a shot. And then as far as exporting flight paths, I showed you KMLs, but you can use GPX or GeoJSON as well to view those trajectories in other flight control or view those flight trajectories in other applications. If you have ideas, if you have problems, or you're stuck somewhere, help@dronesense.com. Eric is often the one who will receive those queries and distributes them on to me or to other people that can help you. We'd really like to get your feedback and also want to make sure that we're helping you however we can. So thanks a ton for joining. Really appreciate you spending the time, and yeah, be safe out there, and hopefully you can use some of these techniques I showed you.